So iterative manner, we keep repeating certain things so that we are able to learn. So it works similar to a human brain. Neural network itself works similar to, it was modeled based on human brain only. Again, deep learning encompasses the natural human behavior. Say suppose we see a rope lying down. So this is a normal example that we give. We try to identify whether it is a rope or a snake. So when we do that, we try to assess certain features. So whether if it is a snake, it has to move, it has to slither. We'll try to feel certain features. So that is how our brain practically works. When we see certain features, with those features, we come to a conclusion that it is a rope or a snake. Similarly, we are going to give our machine this particular ability to learn features from the data. So with that features, the deep learning system will be able to classify or identify certain objects. So that is the main work of deep learning. We do it in an iterative fashion. A human brain doesn't come to a conclusion immediately. It senses, it checks certain features. Our brain gets back to the stored information that we have, and it tries to figure out whether it is going to be a snake or a rope. So it takes few seconds for us to recollect and see what is actually happening. Similarly, here also, we are going to do it in an iterative manner. We are going to repeat certain mathematics or certain modules so that the machine will be able to identify the input that is given to it. It is practically nothing but a neural network which is going to happen in an iterative fashion. So the main task for which this deep learning can be used is classification. So classification is a very important application for which deep learning has been successfully applied across various domains. So we have several layers of nodes between the input and the output. So here I assume that you are aware of, excuse me, you are aware of neural networks. So neural networks, you will have an input layer, you will have an output layer, and in between you will have few hidden layers. So the same architecture will be followed by any deep learning algorithm. So you'll have an input layer, you'll have an output layer, but you're going to have multiple or several combinations of hidden layers. So these hidden layers will actually try to identify certain features. One layer will identify one specific feature. The next layer will identify another feature. So this keeps accumulating, and then we get to the output layer. Based on the learning across the hidden layers, the output layer is going to give us a specific classification. So what are all the application domains? Face recognition, text translation, voice recognition. So all these things are basically broad applications of our deep learning. So we all know neural networks was there for a very long time. Now, why sudden hype in this deep learning? We say that neural network has few hidden layers. A deep learning network is going to have multiple hidden layers and multiple ways of learning those weights. So if that is the case, won't deep learning be too complex to run for any particular application? So the main difference, we are going to get answers for all these things in this session, why deep learning is much better when compared to neural networks for certain type of applications. So basically, neural network has a single architecture. So a single hidden layer, might be few, if not single, at least a few hidden layers. So the algorithms that were written for neural networks will be able to learn these weights. So we are going to actually adapt these weights. I'll give a brief introduction about how we are going to learn in my forthcoming slides. So we are going to learn these weights. Based on these weights, we are going to get an output. So this is for a neural network. The algorithms was written for a lower scale of hidden layers. Now, when we come to deep networks or deep architectures, we have multiple hidden layers. You can see a lot of hidden layers here. So in order to learn the weights of all these hidden layers, an already existing algorithm for a neural network is not sufficient. We want something which is more better, which is able to do it much faster also, because we are going to have a lot of hidden layers. So when we use an algorithm that is used for a normal neural network, it is going to take a lot of time. Obviously, we are going to have the problem of overfitting. I hope you would have also learned about overfitting in your previous neural network classes. So in order to avoid all these things, we are creating special algorithms for training our network. So this deep network requires a different algorithm for training. So that is the difference, basic difference between a neural network and a deep network, a normal neural network and a deep network. We are going to use different algorithms so that we'll have less effort, less computational cost, as well as faster time, so that it can learn across all the deep hidden layers. So that is the main difference we are going to see. Also, we see that deep learning with deep learning, a normal neural network might not be able to achieve all these things, whereas a deep neural network will be able to identify low-level features. So this entire session will be seeing, because we are going to see deep learning. Deep learning is highly attributed to image, sound, video, text, all these things. So these are all the main important domains of deep learning. Of course, raw data, it can learn raw data also, but it is more suitable for applications where we have image, text, or sound or video as an input. So these are all the inputs which are actually large when compared to a normal textual data. So when going for this deep learning can learn low-level features. So low-level features are nothing but lines and edges in an image. So those are simple features. Any normal filter will be able to identify these low-level features. It can also identify high-level features when we have specific hidden layers incorporated in them. So it can access the mid-level features. You can see the mid-level features includes eyes. So from a line, we first the image network sees a line, and then it increases its depth and says that it is not a line, it is an eye. If it is a horizontal line, we can say that it is going to be an eye. If it is a vertical line, we can say it is going to be a nose. So it is able to identify the mid-level features also. So with these information, it can learn the higher level. Accumulating all these information, it can learn the higher level features also, like an entire face. So with an entire face, it can give a precise value of who that person is if we are going to feed in that sufficient data. So high level features, we can identify an entire face, and we can associate that face to a particular name or a particular person associated in our database. So that makes deep learning more interesting compared to our neural networks. So why sudden hype in our deep learning? It has been used in multiple domains, not just for image processing. For in various streams of engineering, we are using deep learning. So the main factors which is driving the use of deep learning is actually three factors. The first one is availability of data. We have large data sets, as I said, right from shopping, right from what we browse in Facebook, right? All these factors, everything is taken and stored in data. Initially, when we went for hospitals, I don't think they were recording all our details. Maybe few details they'll record based upon the physical condition that we currently are. But now, if you go for a medical checkup, or for any other reason, if we go for a hospital, they get data right from our ancestors. What did our parents have? What were the issues they had? Is it a hereditary? So they collect all the information. So these entire data is very, very useful. This is for medical application. If we go for shopping, or if we browse through the Facebook also, what are all the links that we are clicking? What are all we are interested in? If you see in Facebook, once we see a set of videos, automatically the application recommends us similar videos. So those are all nothing but collected from the way we browse. That's nothing but the data that is being collected from our browsing pattern. So data is plentifully available. We have lot of sensors. Mobile phone has a set of sensors. So all these sensors are collecting information, and they can be used for further processing. So availability of data is one particular factor. And the next factor, the hardware setup to handle this data. So that is another important feature. Initially, we didn't have this kind of powerful HPCs, high performance computing systems. Now we have a lot of HPCs, high performance computing systems, which are highly parallelized. There is no serial architecture here. It is highly parallelized. So they are able to handle this voluminous data, and they are able to identify the pattern that is available in the data. One more example is the graphical processing units, GPUs. it is available in our normal laptops, and we can run a set of images or set of data and try to identify patterns using our normal laptops which has a GPU. So availability of hardware, which is also cost effective as well. So that is the second reason why we have a hype in deep learning. And the last one is software, availability of softwares. So softwares, we have a lot of toolboxes, direct toolboxes, which can be just taken and used for our projects. So there are models. We'll see what are all these models that is available. Existing models, existing architectures for deep learning is there. All we have to do is take it and give an input as the data I have collected and use it. The model would have been created by a similar data. All we have to do is just take it and use it. You need not do anything to change. Just run the model with our own data. So availability of such things. Someone somewhere has created a model and it is given free of cost through the net. We can just take and use it. So these are the three broad reasons why we are actually looking a lot into deep learning. Many deep learning applications coming up mainly because of this data. When I say data, the data has to be labeled. We should have a labeled data. Labeled data meaning we should know the output. The data should have an output. So I should have an image of a car. If I have an image of a car, I should know it is a car. I'm going to collect a data where I know the categorical data. I know the output for that particular image. I'll train my network with labeled data. Once my network is trained, if I'm going to give a random image without any labeling, it will be able to give me the output, say that it is a car or a truck or whatever it is. Initially, when I need to train my network, it has to be a labeled data. Labeled data meaning I should know the category or class of that particular image or that particular row of data. If it is going to be in medical applications, I should know the value. If this is the BP, if this is the sugar level, if this is the heart rate, the person is hypertensive. I should know the person is hypertensive. That is going to be the output. So the output should be available initially when I train my data. Of course, we have GPUs, which is used, and then softwares. We have a lot of models. AlexNet is one of the models that is available, freely available. You can just take it and use it for your own application using a technique called as transfer learning. At the end of this session, I'll give a brief introduction about the transfer learning. So because that is the place where you can actually start implementing your own deep learning architecture. So basically, we are talking about neural networks. So we all know what is a neuron. I'm just going to give a brief introduction about the neuron, not going to go deep into it. We have a set of inputs, we have a set of weights, then we have a bias. The function is nothing but a simple weighted sum. So with this weighted sum, I'm going to apply an activation function, a non-linear activation function. So there are a set of activations function. I hope you're aware of all these things. So as far as the deep learning is concerned, we are very, very specific about one particular activation function that is listed here. The last one, rectified linear unit. So this is the activation function we are very much concerned about if you are going to think of using deep learning for your problem rather than a neural network. So this is the most popularly used. It is not necessary that only this has to be used, but this has been in literature. It has given a lot of positive results, very good results when we use the rectified linear unit. So you can see it is nothing but a normal nonlinear function, a simple nonlinear function where all zero values or the negative values are made to zero and non-negative values are retained. So this particular activation function, please remember it, we'll be using it in our later architecture. So this is how our neural network and deep neural networks differ when you see them at an architecture level. So multiple hidden layers, multiple weight trainings are required, and we can have an output layer based on how many categories I have, not just 2. If you're going to have 10 categories, you can have 10 different nodes at the output. So it will be giving you in terms of probabilities. So for each and every output node, there will be a percentage associated. Whatever is going to have the highest percentage, that particular node will be the output, final output, or the final result or final category for that given input. So we are going to go a little deep into our deep neural network. So as I said, we are going to have multiple hidden layers. All are going to work based on one specific important concept called as the filter or the kernel. So the data, the labeled data we are going to identify the features. Each and every layer is going to transform the data in some way or the other and pass it on to the next layer. So each and every layer will do one specific task. First hidden layer will do one specific task. Second hidden layer will do a next specific task. It will perform the transformation and pass it on to the next layer. The third layer will perform its own task, pass it on to the fourth layer. So it goes on like that. Complexity increases from layer to layer. What we mean by complexity here is detail. I showed you, right? Low level features, mid level features, and high level features. So we gradually go from low level features, we move on to the high level features. So the complexity or the detail of what the deep network is learning moves from layer to layer. We'll have a brief go through of how the weights are adjusted. You would have already, I think you would have learned this in your neural networks class also. Just because we are going to see deep layers where we are going to see multiple layers of weight training, we'll just go through a small example where I'm going to adjust the weights and I'll be able to get the final output based on the weight adjustments. So we have a training data here. So this is what I call it as the labeled data. I have a class. I should have a class. So I'm going to have a categorical data. I have a class identified for each of my inputs. So this 3 input variables give me an output of 0. These 3 input variables give me an output of 1. So I should have a class when I'm going to start train my data. So based on this, I'm going to present one particular input or one particular row of data to my network. The network then learns. Say suppose the network doesn't give you the output initially, it will give you a wrong value. Now when it gives me the wrong value, I know what is the right value. That is why we require labeled data. So I know what is my right value. I'm taking 0. So with this, I'm going to compare. I know how much I have deviated from the present result. I'm going to adjust the weights. I modify the weights, I adjust so that I'm getting the proper output. Next, I'm going to present one more training sample. This training sample, again, we'll have to adjust the weights so that I'll get a proper output for this training sample also. This process keeps continuing for each and every layer. For whatever layers we have, this process is going to continue. Now I said we have a deep network where we have multiple hidden layers. So won't this process be time consuming? How am I going to modify this weight training model so that it is not going to be too much time consuming for me, because I have multiple hidden layers, hundreds of hidden layers. So for each and every layer, should I repeat all these processes again and again so that I'll be able to get my output? Will my computing powers be sufficient for handling this? So that is where deep learning and neural network actually varies. We are actually going to modify the weights. So that is the basic task we'll be doing. But the way we are going to modify these weights will be totally different compared to a neural network. So here, when you see it in a classification perspective, I'm going to classify the yellow balls from the blue balls. So I'm drawing a random line so that a random line, which is not a straight line, it is going to be a zigzag line. I'm going to draw it so that I'll be able to distinguish the yellow balls from the blue balls. So here you see, I keep adjusting the weights so that the line that I draw is properly able to segregate the data. So here, finally, I draw something which is too complex, but still then it segregates the data properly between the blue and the yellow balls. So there are two broad differences when I say we are actually drawing the lines. Here, normal neural networks as well as any deep neural network will have a non-linear function, so that the line is also very complex and non-linear. We don't touch the data, we just adapt the lines alone, having a non-linear function. With the help of a non-linear function, I try to adapt my segregating line alone so that I'll be able to differentiate the categories. Whereas there are other methods which are called as kernel-based methods. One of the examples of them is SVM, support vector machines. These functions, basically, they draw a linear line, but then they modify the data. They adjust the data so that all the yellow balls go above the line and all the blue balls come below the line. So these are all two different methods which can be used, but our deep learning network falls under the category of nonlinear function, where we try to draw a complex line. We don't touch the data, or we don't modify the data, we don't move the data. We just draw a complex line so that it will be able to create a separation or categorize the data that we have. So there are different types of deep neural networks. We'll see the broad categories, and there are a set of algorithms. All those algorithms will fall under any of these broad categories. So these are all the broad categories of neural networks. So the first one is the artificial neural network, which is a basic MLP. You would have seen that. We can create with that. That itself, we can create a deep network. Then we have the convolutional neural network, and then we have the recurrent neural network. There are only minor variations between these MLP, CNN, and RNN. Only few different small changes in how each and every network actually learns the particular weight changing parameters for their deep network. So today, our focus for this session will be convolutional neural networks. So here there are a list of algorithms which can be used alongside these deep architectures. There are multiple algorithms for learning. The way they learn the patterns from it, way they adjust the weights, that is the difference between all these algorithms. There are a lot of other algorithms also. I've just listed a few important algorithms. So many would have heard of restricted Boltzmann machine, autoencoders, self-organizing maps. These are all used for recommender systems. So there are multiple such algorithms which can be associated with any of the broad three categories. So it can fall under the category of CNN or RNN or MLP. So broadly, with these algorithms, we can establish a deep architecture. So now we'll start with convolutional neural network, one of the types of deep networks where we are going to have a different pattern, different from that of a normal neural network of learning the weights and adjusting the parameters for a network which is going to have hundreds of hidden layers. So it extracts the data directly from the images. I'm not going to give any weight adaptations inside my network. It automatically does. All I give is just a labeled data. It adapts the weights automatically. I'm not going to do anything concerning the adaptation of weights. So with this, it will be able to extract the features directly from the data set that I have provided. And with the features that is extracted, it can classify the object. So basically, neural networks are best suited for object classification type of applications. So object classification is actually a very broad head. If I'm going to create a robot, I need object classification. If I'm going to create a driverless car, I need object classification. A driverless car should be able to identify a zebra crossing. It should be able to read the signal, traffic signal. It should be able to identify a pedestrian crossing. It should be able to identify whether it is a car or a truck that is ahead of it. So all these categories, all these applications or examples fall under the case of object classification. If I'm going to construct a robot, the robotic vision also requires object classification. So there are a lot of applications where CNN is used. If I'm going to read raw textual data, handwritten data, I should be able to decipher whether it is a or a B or a C. If I'm reading a number plate, I should be able to give out actually what the number is. So all these categories, all these types of applications can be handled by a convolution neural network. So used for, as I said, it is used for video, images, image processing. Those are all the main application domains of convolutional neural networks. The basic building block of this neural network is nothing but a filter, or sometimes we also call it as a kernel. So this is the basic building block. The filters determine the efficiency of the convolutional neural networks. We are going to use multiple filters for the different layers of a CNN. With these filters, we'll be able to extract the correct features from the input data. So this is some of the application domains that I was saying about: chatbots, autonomous cars, face recognition, etc. So some more examples. So they are also used for diagnosis of medical problems. So with a scanned report or with an X-ray report, we'll be able to identify where there are lesions, where there are tumors, are there any lumps that is being identified. So you'll be able to identify. It has also been used for COVID identification using chest X-ray. They are able to diagnose based on how it is actually how much clouded or how much confused our particular lung is there. So all these types of applications can be handled by a normal convolutional neural network. So now we'll get a little more deep into CNN. We'll see the process. We'll see the process, and then we'll see individual steps associated with these process, and a little of mathematics behind these process. So we are going to start with an input image. I'm going to use a filter. The second step is I should have a filter in hand. For each and every layer, I'm going to use different filters. So how many features or what type of features I'm going to extract, based on that, I'm going to identify my filters, different filters for different stages. And then, as I said we are going to use an activation function for inducing non-linearity. So as I said, we are going to draw a non-linear line. So we need a non-linear activation function. So I'm using ReLU. ReLU is nothing but rectified linear unit. I showed you a little while ago. So this rectified linear unit activation function is the most commonly used activation function for CNN, but it's not a mandatory thing to use just this ReLU. We can use other functions also, but literature says that it is giving good results as far as image is concerned. So the next thing is, so I've taken filter image. I'm using this activation function. I'm going to do something called as pooling. The pooling is done to reduce the complexity. So this is where our CNN and a normal NN differs. I'm going to use pooling. I'm going to reduce my complexity. So as we go through the layers, the complexity of the image reduces. That is why CNNs are faster, even if they are going to have multiple layers compared to a neural network. I'm going to do pooling, and then the next step will be to flatten. I'm going to deal entirely with matrices right from the first input image. An input image will be stored as a matrix in a system. All the individual information that we see in a particular image or a picture is converted to a pixel value. We call it as pixel. It is converted to a pixel value, and it is going to be a normal matrix. Now this matrix, so far we'll be dealing only with matrices. When we come to the final layer, I'm going to convert this matrix into a vector or a flattened data. So that is what we call it as the flattening. And after that flattening, I'm going to have a fully connected normal neural network. So far we had CNN. The last stage of a CNN will be a normal neural network where we have full connections and we try to adapt all the individual weights. So that will be the last layer. The output of the last layer is going to be probabilities. It will give you exact percentages, 90, 80, 10, 5. So it is going to give us exact probabilities of the different classes. This particular step is actually repeated depending upon the features we are trying to read from the input image. It repeats, and at last I'm going to give the final class output in terms of probabilities. So this entire process, what we are seeing here, almost 5 or 6, 7 steps that we are seeing in this CNN process, is categorized into 2 broad heads. The first head is the feature learning, which is done by the convolutional layers. The next one is the classification, which is done by the fully connected layer. So fully connected layer is a single layer, whereas the convolution, we can have hundreds of convolutional layers. Okay, so that is the difference between these two. Feature learning is done in multiple layers, whereas the classification just requires one fully connected layer. It will automatically give us the output based on the layers that it has learned from the previous thing. So if you see this architecture, you'll be able to understand it better. So I have an input image here. So this is the input image of a car. I'm using convolutional layer, multiple layers. You can see here, convolution, and then ReLU. ReLU is nothing but the activation function, non-linear activation function. So this convolution plus ReLU is there. And then I'm doing a pooling. This pooling function, we'll see the mathematics behind all these things shortly. So this pooling function reduces the dimensionality. It further reduces the complexity of our problem without much loss of information. There will be little loss of information, but the loss is not too alarming. We'll be able to identify it exactly without any complications. We'll see how it happens shortly. So we have a convolution function. We do a non-linear activation, and then we do a pooling. All these 3 things together constitutes a convolution layer. So you can see here, all these three things together will constitute one convolution layer. This one layer will actually learn one particular feature. That is why we call it as feature learning. One particular feature from the input image. So then we have multiple such layers learning multiple features from the input image. So you can see the complexity actually reduces as we progress through the multiple hidden layers in a CNN. So that is why even though we have hundreds of hidden layers, it is not that very complex in training a CNN as compared to a neural network with hundreds of hidden layers. A neural network with hundreds of hidden layers is not practically possible to train, whereas a CNN which has a different feature of learning, a convolution, an activation, and then a pooling combined together to form a convolutional layer. This layer is stacked one after the other so that it learns multiple features. From this entire setup, we learn a feature and we call the output as a feature map. The input will be an image. Once it goes through the different convolutional layers, we are only dealing with feature maps. We have actually reduced the complexity and we are dealing with only feature maps. And then finally, I'm going to do a flattening. You can see I'm dealing with only matrices. So at the last stage, I'm going to convert it into a normal flattened data. This flattened data is then connected to a fully connected normal neural network where I'll have to learn all the weights. I'll do all the weight learning and training. Finally, I'm going to give the output. The output will be in terms of probabilities of to which category this particular image belongs to. So this is the broad segmentation, feature learning layers, which involves convolutional layers. And the last one is classification, which has a single fully connected layer. I hope you are able to understand this architecture. Only if you understand this architecture, next when we go for the mathematics behind these architectures, it will be easy to understand. If we have any doubts, maybe I can clarify at this stage. So I'll just proceed because there was no doubts. I'll just proceed. I assume that you have understood the architecture behind CNN. Now we'll go a little deep on the different types of processes or techniques that each and every layer or each and every step. Convolutional layer itself has three steps: convolution, ReLU or the activation, and then pooling. So you can see it has convolution, it has activation, and then the pooling. Convolution layer in itself has three steps. First is convolution, which will use spatial structures and local receptive fields so that it will be able to learn the input data. Here we have shared weights and biases. Each and every layer will have a common weight. So I don't have to learn every weights and connections and biases. One layer, only one particular weight, because I'm learning only one particular feature in one particular layer. I'm not learning all the features in every layer. I'm learning one feature in one layer, next feature in next layer, next feature. It goes on like that. Whereas a neural network will be actually trying to learn all the features right from the beginning. Here we don't do that. We are segregating and we are passing only the pooled data or the reduced data to the next stage. That is why we have shared weights as far as a CNN is concerned, and it also reduces the size, and because of that our complexity reduces much further. This is the way it learns across the images. And then we are going to do an activation using the ReLU function, and finally we are going to pool. Now this convolution, we'll see how this convolution basically happens. So convolution, we are going to apply filters. So we are going to use filters for the convolutional step, and for the non-linearity, often it is ReLU. As I said, you can also use other activation functions. And then for pooling also has 2 or 3 methods of doing a reduction. We're actually downsizing it without any loss of information. So this feature reduction layer, we'll just see this particular segment. We'll go deep into this particular segment of feature learning. Convolutional uses filters, ReLU, activation, and pooling. It simplifies the output. So these operations are repeated. So that is the most important thing as far as the CNN is concerned. It can be repeated for hundreds of layers so that it will detect different features. So we'll go on to the classification layer, the next layer. So it is a fully connected layer. All input nodes are connected to all the hidden nodes, and we'll have to adjust or adapt all the weights in the fully connected layer. So far, we'll not be doing it in the convolutional layer. When we see the mathematics behind the convolution, you will understand the difference between a convolutional layer with shared weights and a fully connected layer where we try to learn all the weights. You'll see the difference when we go deep into the mathematics. And the last layer is generally, the CNNs generally use softmax. As we use a ReLU for activation, one of the most commonly or often used function for the last probability classification is softmax. This is one of the famous functions which is used for calculating the probability based on the feature maps. So just remember softmax. We'll see the mathematics also a little ahead. Now we'll see it with an example of classification. We'll take one simple example and then we'll go through the different mathematics in the different layers, and we'll see how it actually comes and ends up with the probability. So 99% probability of a car, 1% probability of a duck, 0% probability of a human being. So it gives us the output in terms of probabilities. So how it happens, we'll see in terms of the mathematics. So first step is convolution. Next is activation. Third one is pooling. All these three things together represents the convolutional layer. Next, the classification layer, we do a fully connected network. Then we do softmax and we give out probabilities. So these are the 5 basic steps. So the first step, convolution. As I said, I'm not going to learn all the weights. So that is the biggest difference between a CNN and a normal NN. I'm going to use some concept called as the local receptive fields. Here, I'm transforming the image to a feature map. I just want the features. I don't want the entire image. An entire image could be a 256 cross 256 matrix. An input image which is stored in a system is stored in terms of pixel values. Each and every pixel will have a value, specific value, depending upon the light intensity. Now, this particular light intensity value is stored in a matrix. So we'll have a 256 cross 256 for a particular image, or 512 cross 512. So it depends. Also, an image which is a color image will have depth as well. So for red color, I'll have a matrix. For green, I'll have a matrix. For blue, I'll have a matrix. So there will be multiple matrices which will combine together to give us the final image. Now what I'm going to do this is the complexity of image processing. You're going to have a depth, a matrix of size 256 cross 256 with the depth also, maybe 8 different layers in a single image itself, or 3 different layers in a single image itself. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to use the entire set of pixels. I'm going to reduce it to a feature map without much loss of information. So for that, I'm going to use a technique called as the local receptive fields. I'm going to take a 4 cross 4 matrix. Only this 4 cross 4 matrix will be connected to one of the feature map for the next layer. So all the 4 cross 4 data will not be used. This 4 cross 4 data will be transformed to a single data that will be given for the next layer. So automatically we are reducing the size as well as the complexity. This is what we call it as the local receptive fields. The input image is converted to something called as the feature map. So this feature map will keep progressing across the hidden layers with reduced complexity. That also, I'm taking a 4 cross, or you can take 3 cross 3, depending upon what type of architecture you are going to convert or what is the size of your input image. We can change the size of this particular receptive field. It can be 4 cross 4 or 3 cross 3 based upon our requirement. So you can see here, this red box, it is a 4 cross 4 matrix. The data in this entire matrix is converted to a single data in the feature map. So this particular reduced feature map will go as input for the next layer. I will not be dealing with the bigger matrix. I'll use only the smaller matrix for the upcoming layers. Next, what I do is I move. How do I construct this particular matrix? I slide my window. I'm going to use a sliding window so that it slides through my image matrix, and I'm going to write the next value. So you can see here, I have a 4 cross 4 starting from the first column to fourth column. In the next data for the next row in my feature map, I have moved 2 columns. I have not moved single column. I have moved 2 columns, and I'm having a column from the 3 to 7. So this is then used for calculating the second value in my feature map. So I'm sliding across the image. So this continues, and we are going to slide across the image till I reach the last row, last column. I'll be sliding across and I'll be identifying the values in the feature map. This 2 column, we call it as the stride length. If I'm going to move just 1 column, stride length will be 1. If I move 2 columns, the stride length will be 2. We call it as the stride length. The number of columns it moves across, it can be either onto the horizontal side, or it can also move down based upon how we are actually convoluting the input image. So this is how it happens. Once we convolute and then we convert to a reduced feature map, I'm going to do my activation using the ReLU function. So the ReLU function, what we saw in that function was, it will only keep the positive values. All negative values will be converted to 0. We'll see how it actually works. So this is an input image. This is an entire architecture for image classification. I've taken an input image. You can see I have multiple convolutional layers. One layer will have all the 3 tasks: convolution, ReLU, and pooling. So convolution, that is what we saw, the sliding window, that we do a convolution. How the sliding window is done and what is the actual window and how those 4 cross 4 value is converted to a single value, we'll see shortly. Next, we do a ReLU, and finally we pool. This feature map is passed on to the next set of convolution layer. So it goes on, and finally we have. So the probability for a flower will be 95. For a cup, maybe 0.01, a car totally 0, a tree maybe 2. So this is how it will give output for the probabilities. So you can see this will be the set of images and filters, how it actually transfers through these different layers, and how I finally reach the output. So this is how the feature map in between it will look like. So it will be completely distorted. For us, we know a human brain will be able to identify, but a machine will be basically dealing with something like this. So these are all the translated images. I have one more output also, so that you will be able to see it more clearly. So this is a convolutional layer for handwritten text analysis. We try to identify whether this is a 2 or a 3 or a 7. So all these things happen. You can see the size gets reduced each and every time. Because of this only, a CNN has reduced complexity compared to a neural network. So we'll take one specific example. We'll have numbers, and then we'll see how this convolution happens, activation happens, and pooling happens. So we are going to see the mathematics behind now. So I'm going to take an image, 5 cross 5 image. I'm just, for the sake of simplicity, I'm taking only one channel. I'm not going to create the depth. Depth might be required. Height and breadth will be the rows and columns of a matrix. There will be depth also. As I said, an image will always have a depth. It can be the color or the hue. There will be a depth matrix also. So for the time being, and for just understanding what is a CNN, we'll just drop out the depth. Whatever we do it for a single matrix is done for the depth matrices also. So we'll just take one matrix, 5 cross 5, an image. I'm going to use a kernel or a filter. This is the key factor in a CNN, that is going to be 3 cross 3. The kernel or filter should always be smaller in size compared to my original image. Then only I can slide across. If my kernel is also 5 cross 5, there is nothing concept called a sliding. Only if you have a smaller filter, you can slide across. So my image is 5 cross 5 and my kernel is 3 cross 1. So these are all the multiple filters that we already have. There are filters for blurring, there are filters for sharpening, there are multiple filters. You can create your own filter also based on your own application. It is not mandatory to use only existing filters. We can create our own filters as well. That is a specific research area where we try to create filters which will give us better output in a CNN. So these are all the existing filters that we have. Gaussian blur and box blur. So there are certain filters which can be directly taken and used from the shelf. So it is already there in the literature. You can take these filters and use for our own images. Now I have a 5 cross 5 image. So this is my 5 cross 5 image. I'm going to use this particular filter. All are numbers. Basically, they will be real numbers. So just for the sake of simplicity, in order to understand, I've given zeros and ones. Basically, everything will be intensity values of an image. So they'll be real. So for our example, we'll just start with this. I'll show an example also with real values. So we are going to start with zeros and ones here. So this is my image and this is my filter. And now you are going to see the slide across process. So I'm just doing a multiplication, not a normal matrix multiplication, but an element wise multiplication. I'm going to superimpose this 3 cross 3 filter onto my image, and I'm going to do a element wise multiplication. So here in my filter on the first row, I have 1, 0, 1. So I'm just going to multiply this 1, 0, 1 with the information in my image. So here I have the first row as 1, 1, 1. I'm just doing a normal element wise multiplication, not a normal usual matrix multiplication. And element wise multiplication is done. So 1 into 1, 1 into 0, and then we have one more 1 into 1. And then we are going to do with the second row. Similarly, third row, I'm going to sum all these values. So wherever there is 0, I don't get an output. So here I have 1, here I have 1. Here there is one more 1, and then the last row, last column, I have one more 1. So that is why my output is 4, an element wise multiplication. So we do this and then I slide across. So after completing the first row, first 3 cross 3, I move to the next 3 cross 3. Here I'm just moving to the next immediate column. So here my stride length is 1. In the first example I showed, we left 2 columns and we moved from 3 to 7. Here I am not doing that because I've taken only 5 cross 5. I'm just leaving the first column and going to the 2, 3, and 4 columns for my filter. So here the stride length is 1. Again, I'm going to do a element wise multiplication. So it progresses. So I'm going to get a 3 cross 3. Depending upon the stride length, the size of the feature map will vary. So I think you'll be able to feel that. So depending upon the stride length that I have, the size of the feature map will keep varying. If I'm going to have a larger stride length, my feature map will be much reduced in size. For one stride length, the feature map will be same as that of the filter. So you can just keep moving. On the row wise also, I have moved just 1. For the row also, I've gone to just the next row. I've left the first row and I've gone to the next row. So I keep populating my feature map. So this is my input image. Whatever is here in green is my input image. This is my filter. And finally, I'm getting my feature map. The entire input image is converted to a feature map. The complexity of the input image is reduced with the help of the filter. So that's why I say filter is very, very important. What type of filter we are going to use for our data. So this is one more example where we have numbers, not just zeros and ones. We have integer numbers where we convert, slide across. Here again, the stride length is 1. I stride across and try to populate my feature map. So this is one more example where I've done padding. Because my image size is much smaller, I can do a padding of zeros. The first column and the first row, I'm going to just entirely pad my matrix and then move. So there are multiple techniques which you will learn as you get interested in this thing. But basically, just know that you are just running across your filter. You are just running across the input matrix or input image matrix. As I said, for each and every channel, you can have different filters. So I'm having multiple filters. Say, suppose my image has 3 layers, red, green, and blue. So for all the 3 layers or the 3 channels, I'm using different filters. I'm just doing a summation and giving out the feature map. So this is how a normal convolution happens. This particular process is called as the convolution, the first step of a CNN, where an image is converted to a feature map. So the next step, once the convolution is done, input image converted to a feature map. Now this feature map is then applied onto a nonlinear activation function. So ReLU will be the best example. There are other such things also. So this is the graph of a ReLU. You can see all negative values in the x-axis, all negative values will be converted to 0, whereas the positive values will be retained. There won't be any modifications in the positive values. So in this image, you can see black values are basically negative. When we apply a ReLU function, and then this is a feature map. So an input image is a building. It is converted to a feature map, and this is how our feature map will look like. And then I apply ReLU. When I have a ReLU function, all the blacks will be gone. I'll have only the non-negative positive values. So for us, studying these things might look hard. For us, an image, a normal human eye will be able to read a normal image much better, whereas a computer will be able to read such images much better than a normal image. It needs specific numbers to deal with and give output. So that is why we are converting everything into small feature maps or specific numbers. So this is a normal activation function. You can see a 3x3 matrix. I've converted all the negative numbers to 0, whereas the positive numbers are totally retained without any modification. So this is, we call it as the activation. And the next step or the last step of the convolutional layer, single convolutional layer, is pooling. So in pooling, we try to reduce the matrix feature map size without much loss of information. So here again, there are multiple methods for pooling, just like we had ReLU. For pooling, the most common method is max pooling. So as the name suggests, maximum value. I'm going to take a 2x2 matrix and I'm going to use the maximum value 1156. So here 6 is the maximum value. So my output after pooling will be just a 6. So instead of all these 4 values, I just retain my 6. It is used for reduced dimensionality. It also has spatial invariance where we make sure that wherever it is available, we get the brightest spot. That is what max pooling means. So in the next thing, 8 is the maximum value. The next 4, we have 3 as the maximum value. And for the last 4, we have 4 as the maximum value. So this is max pooling where I take the maximum value in my matrix. So here also you'll be using stride. Again, you'll be using strides here as we used in the convolution function. Here again, I'll be using stride. I'll stride across, but the point is I'm not going to use any filter. All I'm going to do is take the maximum value if it is max pooling. If it is average pooling, I'll be taking the average value. So there are different mean is there. There are other type of pooling methods. Mean is nothing but the average pooling. Summation is there. So there are few different pooling methods. But the general method that is practically used with CNN along with ReLU and softmax is the max pooling method. So here, obviously, you have the stride. So I told you about the stride. It's nothing but a number of columns that I'm going to leave, columns or row that I leave to stride across so that I'll be able to get my data. So I've completed the mathematics behind the convolutional layer. So convolutional layer, 3 tasks. Convolution based on a filter using simple element-wise matrix multiplication. Next, we had a ReLU function which retains only the positive values. So that is the mathematics behind our ReLU function. And then we had pooling where we can use max pooling or mean pooling where we'll take the size, whatever I want to reduce. Based on that, I'll be taking the maximum value or the average value. I'll be reducing my data without much loss of data. So this is what is happening in the convolutional layer. Now all these 3 steps are repeated several times for each and every channel. RGB for all the 3 channels, I'll be repeating it with different filters. Again, for the next set of convolutional layer, I'll be using a totally different filter. So based on the different filters, I'll be trying to read features from my input matrix. Once all the convolutional layer activities are completed, my feature map would have learned all the features. So the neurons in the first hidden layer will be reading basic lines. It will just read lines. The next neurons will try to read the orientation, or the next hidden layer will try to read the orientation. For one layer, there is only one set of weights. For consecutive layers, I'm reducing the complexity in terms of size of the matrix as well as already learned features. So it keeps progressing this way. Finally, I come to the end of the last hidden layer. At the end of the last hidden layer, I'll be having a matrix. Now this matrix first should be converted to a flattened data or a one stretch vector. Starting from the first row, I'm going to end with the last row and column. I'm going to flatten my data. Now this flattened data will be given as input to my fully connected layer. This fully connected layer will adjust the weights so that it will learn the output. Finally, it is going to give out probabilities in terms of a function called as the softmax. So this is one of the common function. So this is the equation for the softmax, which is nothing but exponent raised to the value divided by a normal normalization formula. This is a normal normalization formula where I'm going to use E. That is the only difference, E raised to the power of that value. So we'll see the example here. So this is the steps that is used for a softmax. Raise E to the power of the number that I'm having. So I have a matrix. I flattened that and made it into a vector. I'm going to adjust my weights and I have a vector. So from here on, I'm not having a matrix. I'm having a single row of data. Now this row of data, each and maybe if it is a 3x3, I'm going to have 9 values. So these 9 values, I'm going to apply it onto the softmax. The denominator is nothing but the sum of all the exponentials, whereas the numerator is the individual value raised to those powers. So that is going to be my numerator. So here we have an example. After the fully connected weight changes, I'm going to apply this. So flattened data given on to the fully connected layer, I'm going to do weight adjustments, and then the entire data, whatever I get out from the fully connected layer, I'm applying a softmax. Say suppose these are all the values. First I calculate the denominator, raising the individual values to the power of E. So E power minus 1, 0, all are raised, and I'm getting a numerical value. Now this will be my denominator, you can see here. So for minus 1, I'm going to have this individual value 0.36, and then I'm going to divide it by 169.87 and I get a probability. So because it is a probability, when you sum up all these things, it will end up in 1. So that is the main idea of the softmax. You will actually total it. If you are going to take it as a percentage, it will end up in 100. Otherwise, it will total it to a value of 1. So this is how our softmax works. So this is one of the most famous functions which is used alongside ReLU, so that we'll be able to get probabilities at the output. I hope you are able to understand the mathematics. So now we have completed the mathematics in each and every layer. Convolutional layer mathematics was done, and then the fully connected layer mathematics is also done. We are flattening it and applying the softmax. So I'll just sum it up, because next segment we are going to see only an example. Just I'll give a summation overview. So first level was feature learning, where we had the input layers. In multiple layers, we tried to learn the features using non-linearity and activation function, and then we reduced the dimensionality using pooling without much loss of data. And then we went for the classification, where the fully connected layers output is applied on to any mathematical function. The example that we saw here was softmax. The softmax output will be automatically in terms of probabilities, so that it will sum up to 1. So this is the entire structure. It is actually simple. If we just run through, it will be very simple. There are only repetitions. The convolutional layer is the longest or the biggest layer, having hundreds of layers, but it is basic repetition. We are not going to change anything except the filter. Only the filter is getting changed. All the other mathematics behind is the same. Whatever be the filter, I'm going to use only element-wise multiplication. So the max behind is simple element-wise multiplication. The max behind is just finding the maximum of a set of pixels. So the max behind is very simple. Only thing is I'll have to arrange the components in a proper order, so that my CNN is properly organized for identifying the features. Now we'll see a full-fledged example. So I have an input image of a cat, and I'm going to identify whether it is a cat or a dog or a human baby sitting like that. So I'm going to try to find out. So I'm using different filters. For the sake of example, we have 2 or 3 filters here, but there will be multiple filters. For each and every layer, there will be filters. For each and every depth, there will be a filter, associated filter. Once I apply a filter, this is how my output will look like. For us, this is not decipherable, whereas for a computer, this is one which is highly decipherable. They'll be able to identify from these images much better than this. So this is what we'll get from the output of a convolutional layer, and then we are going to do the pooling. After the activation, I'm going to do the pooling. So as I said, we are taking the maximum point maximum value, max pooling, maximum value, automatically maximum value will be the brightest point. So you'll be able to see the difference here. This particular output image is giving this particular output. So you can see it is much better, more number of features. You are able to identify the edges much better. So you're trying to identify the edges here. So you'll be able to identify the edges much better. So this particular layer identifies the edges alone. Next, we'll have multiple layers for accessing and validating the data. So this entire architecture is what we are going to group together for creating a neural network, CNN. I hope so far I was understandable to you. So next we'll see a simple architecture, a deep learning framework. So not much of a thing. How we are, if at all you want to start your work in deep learning, if at all you want to start your CNN, how to go about. There are certain low-level frameworks and there are high-level frameworks. They are basically reusable code blocks. So as you know, as I already told you, we are just repeating certain things. So obviously it is going to be reusable. Once you write for one layer, you can repeat it for the other layers, just modifying the filters. So there are two frameworks. One is the low-level framework and then the high-level framework. The low-level framework, basically it uses TensorFlow and PyChart. Those who have already worked on neural network and other image processing will be able to identify these things. They are very flexible because they are low level. You can modify, bring about any changes that you want when using TensorFlow and PyChart, PyTorch. And the high level framework, it is not that very flexible and customizable, but it will be able to give you the proper output based on how we have learned from the low level framework. So one of the example for the high level framework is the Keras. This is a very popular framework that many image application domains preferably use. So one more technique is the RCNN. If you felt CNN was little complex, maybe you need not go through this RCNN. It's just this one slide. I'm not going to go deep into RCNN. There are multiple methods, RBM, restricted Boltzmann machine. There are multiple methods. CNN is one way of doing deep learning. This RCNN, why I just took this example was, it is very close to what we learned now, CNN. A CNN takes an entire image and does the classification, whereas an RCNN, if there are too many features or too many objects in an image, we are going to region out. I'm going to extract my region of interest. I'm going to take my region of interest. That will be my first step. I'll start from my region of interest. I'll break my image into different regions of interest. From that, I'll try to apply a normal CNN. That is why we call it as RCNN, recurrent CNN. I'm going to take just this person alone. For this person alone, I'll be using CNN and I'll be trying to classify what sort of image he is. So from this, I'll try to entirely identify my scene. So there is a person in a horse with a wooden background. So I'll be able to give such detailed things. This is what is used in robots. They'll be able to identify the entire scene, right from the background to the foreground. They'll be able to give information. So there they use this RCNN, which is nothing but stacking up of CNN. In CNN, we had different layers. Similarly, when you are going to apply it again and again for a single image, we are going to call it as RCNN. So these are all other examples of computer vision where we can basically use our CNN in robotics. Even in our phones, we do have, there is an app where if you show your face, it is going to give the age, approximate age of that particular person. I hope many would have tried that app. So all these things basically works using this. Then biological, yes, in medicine we'll be able to find where is a lesion, where there is a tumor, autonomous driving cars. So this is how it will be actually identifying the face. It will try to identify the eyes, the direction the eyes are, the length between the eyes. That is how they'll differentiate between a human and an animal. Human beings have certain features. With those features, it will try to identify. Each and every animal has a feature. A dog has a set of features. A cat will have a set of features. So when it learns all those features, it will be able to categorize whether it is a human being or a cat or a dog or a kid. So they'll be able to identify based on the specific features for each and every person, just like a human brain. When we see a cat, the image that I showed you a little while, Suddenly, if we see, it just looks like a small baby sitting, but there is a tail, there are whiskers, the face is different, the body is different. Only from that, we'll be able to say it is not a child, but it is a cat. Similarly, our CNN also does the same thing. It goes step by step and identifies whether it is a cat or a child. So this is an example of an autonomous driving car. So this is what I said about the COVID image. You can have a X-ray and we'll be able to identify what type, how much percentage of lungs is clouded because of the infection. So this is the last segment of this particular session. The last segment, I would like to give you knowledge about transfer learning, starting and creating our own CNN with our own data set. If it is little complex for doing all these things, we can start our learning from transfer learning. So this transfer learning will be very useful for starting your deep learning architectures. Here, the basic ideology is I'm not going to train my network from scratch. So in order to train my network from scratch, as I said you, there are three important concepts. One is I need a lot of data. I need at least to some extent a GPU. Without a GPU, I cannot do. So I need a GPU. And finally, I need some wonderful typing or coding technique, coding skills is required, at least to some extent. There are many frameworks, low level and high level frameworks, where you can just take it, do modifications and start using them. Python has a set of packages and MATLAB has a set of packages. You can start working from them directly, even if your coding skills is very poor. Even then, you have to go through all these things. You should accumulate millions of data. You should have a decent laptop to start with, and then you should have a basic programming skill. If suppose I want to just start my learning without doing all these things, basically I'm going to just have a hands-on feeling with using a network. If that is what you are going to start with, then transfer learning will be the place where you can actually start. This transfer learning is basically what it actually means is someone somewhere has used millions of data, has used a high performance computing system and trained and created a model. The model can be stored in terms of numbers. As I said you, these models are nothing but basic things. There is going to be a filter for each and every layer. I'm going to use certain activation function, something like ReLU. All are simple mathematics. So someone somewhere who is having voluminous data has created a convolutional neural network, and they have trained the entire network, all the 100 layers they have trained, the fully connected layer also they have trained, and they have created an output. This network can be stored as numbers in a system. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that model. We call it as a model. Someone has created a model and it can be ported across different systems. So I'm going to take that model. I have made might be hundreds of data. The model was originally created using millions of data. All I have is a few thousands of data. So I'm going to take that model. Instead of the millions of, my system cannot handle million data because I'm having only a normal GPU. So I'm going to take this model. The model is computationally very less intensive when compared to the original CNN, which was handling millions of data. So my model is very low in computational overhead. So I'm taking that model. I'm using my thousands or hundreds of data. I'm doing few changes. I cannot exactly use that. I'm going to do small minor changes with my very little skills, programming skill set. Few changes is enough. I'm going to do the changes and I'm going to get a decent output. So I have not created a CNN from scratch. I'm using someone's model and I'm applying it for my own application. Maybe there is a model for identifying vehicles, whether it is a car or a truck or it is a bicycle. Even that particular model can be used for identifying different animals. So that is the way in which transfer learning basically works. Why this works? I have studied something for a vehicle. I am applying it for an animal data set. Will it work? Yes, it works, because a system doesn't know whether it is a car or a truck. All it knows is lines, circles, arcs, everything. It knows only edges. It knows only height. A car, might be it will have a height of 5 units, where a truck is going to have a height of 10 units. All it knows is lines, arcs, or the distance between the eyes. Distance, we don't say it as eyes, the distance between two lines. So based on this only, our system basically learns. Now, applying this feature for animal data set is practically possible. Only thing is the last few layers should be varied. The first layers where we learn the low level features, I showed you, right? Low level, mid level, and high level features. The first few layers where we learn the low level features are same, whether it is a car or whether it is a human being or whether it is an animal, it is not at all a problem. All I want is just the edge. It can be an edge of anything or anybody. So based on this, there are universal low level features. So this is the key point here for transfer learning. Based on these low level features, final stage, maybe the final last two convolutional layer or the last three convolutional layer, I'll try to learn the differences between a vehicle and an animal. I'll try to learn the distance between the eyes. I'll try to learn whether there are whiskers, whether there are ears. So I'll try to learn only those specific features at the last 2 or 3 layers. With this, I'll be able to completely convert an already existing model which is used for a vehicle to be applied to an animal data set. So this is how it works. You can see the size difference. The source data is too big. ImageNet is one such data set. It is too big. They have created a model based on this. So this model can be directly used here with a much smaller data set because we have a very low computing power. We don't have high HPCs. So we can use a smaller data set, but this model can be applied. The model is computationally much less expensive when compared to the original data or the original CNN. So this is the basic architecture for a transfer learning. Now this transfer learning can be used for object recognitions. So where a pre-trained CNN is taken, the first step is to load a pre-trained CNN model, and then I'm not going to make any changes at the lower levels. So lower level convolutional layers, I'm not going to modify anything, neither the filter nor the weights. I'm not going to change anything at the lower level convolutional layer. I'm going to modify the last few layers. Sometimes we might add few layers. If we want, we can add few more layers for learning specific features. Dealing with human being, studying to learn different persons, I'm going to add specific layers just for doing that. I'll adapt only those weights. So for almost 90 convolution layer, I'm not going to do any changes. Only for the last 10 layers, I'm going to do few changes. Now with my reduced data set, I'm going to train. Why reduced data set itself is enough? Because the first few tens of layers have already been learned. I don't want much data to learn it again because it is already learned. Small amount of data itself is enough to train my last 10 layers alone. This particular process can be done back and forth. If you want, you can modify a previous layer. So it can be done. Once you start taking up this transfer learning, you'll be able to identify. As and when required, you can do changes if you want. If you feel like your accuracy has to improve, you can do some changes here and there. So this is the last part, the existing models that we already have, where we can just download it and use them. VGG model is one of the famous models for image processing. ResNet is one more model which is used for image processing, and for language also, that is for graphical analysis, handwritten text analysis. So for all those kind of things, there are 2 more models which is available in the net, where you can just take it, load it, and then use it for your own data set. So this is the place where you can start with deep learning. Maybe gradually you can build your own CNN. Just one more output here. You can see it has identified a dog, a bicycle, a car. A better model will be able to identify the tree as well. So you can see a better model here. It sees the difference between a car and a truck. It is able to identify a bicycle. A traffic light is also identifiable. So this is what will be used for our autonomous vehicles. Thank you. I hope I was able to convey what I wanted to share it with you. Once again, I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. If you have any doubts, maybe we can discuss now.
Participants, if you have any query, you can ask. And type your query in the chat box also. Please give your feedback. If you don't have any query, then we may wind up the session. Okay, thank you for your feedback. So on behalf of all the participants, I wholeheartedly thank Dr. Mirunaju Amali ma'am for your wonderful presentation. So we are getting an insight about deep learning, various layers of deep learning. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for
Thank you,
your
ma'am.
valuable
Thank you for the
timing
opportunity, ma'am.
and valuable presentation. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Participants, thank you for your patient listening. We will meet again at 11:30. Please join at 11:30 for next session. Next session, we are again having the application of deep learning in smart grid environment. Thank you.